So with that, we have another speaker coming in a little bit, but I want to invite our first panel of champions to come on up and grab your seats, and we'll start to get going with our first panel. So we have Davis Finney, Angela Robb, Stephen DeWitt, Gregory Wasson, and that's it for our first panel. Let's welcome our first panel up to the stage. Thank you so much. So before we get started, I just want to quickly explain why I just called my mom out to stand up in the back of the audience here. You know, I'm sort of new to the work in the Parkinson's field and engaging with all of you. A couple months ago, it was about December, around Christmas time, I went home for the holidays all the way to Bethesda, Maryland. My mom had started to get weaker and thinner and wasn't eating as much, and we didn't really know what was wrong, and that sort of continued and progressed into January. And I got a call one day, and my mom was at Georgetown MedStar Hospital, and I sort of rushed over there from the White House and went in, and we started to try and figure out what was going on. And one of the doctors sort of made an offhand comment, and I remember this very well: "Oh, it might be Parkinson's." And that really stuck with me, obviously. And she sort of continued to deteriorate for a couple weeks, actually I think probably about a month, until she was actually diagnosed with Parkinson's. And the really incredible thing is, and she's doing really well right now, is the moment she started to take the medicine, I think it was probably like 2 weeks, and she was like back in action and totally turned around. I think you guys heard this from my dad yesterday, Terry Learman, but it was just amazing. And that progress would not have happened, those medicines would not have been available without you all advocating and organizing across the country and the research that you've done. So I'm just indebted to each and every one of you for the work that you've done to get us this far, and I'll be there working with and alongside you for many years to come. So I look forward to working with all of you. So with that, I'm incredibly excited to be able to moderate our first panel, and we have an incredibly distinguished group of folks up here, all of whom I know have been doing this work for quite some time. So why don't we actually just let each of you introduce yourselves, tell us why you're here, and we're excited to have you.
Why am I here? All right, thanks, Kyle. First, let me say thank you to the White House. And thank you to Pan. You all have, to echo Kyle, have done such amazing work. And we're certainly grateful for that fact. But I also would be remiss in not thanking a few other people among many who've been on my team through this journey. First and foremost, my wife, Connie, who's not only an uber mother to our two children, Taylor and Kelsey, but also she's just a wonderful, caring partner to me, and I would be nowhere without her. And by the way, she's an Olympic champion. I'd also like to thank Dr. Helen Bronte Stewart, who's my most amazing neurologist out at Stanford, and also Polly Dawkins and Heather Hine from the Davis Finney Foundation, who continue to make me more than proud with the work that they do for our community. Now, to address your question. You know, I received a note the other day from a young onset member of our community, and they were congratulating me on this honor. And following up, the woman said, "You help so many of us live well. And if there's one reason that I'm here for a champion of change, it's because I feel like we, myself and the foundation, have added the term living well and living well today to the Parkinson's lexicon. And we've worked very hard to get people to not wait for a cure, because waiting is too passive a response. But to work towards a cure, to hope for a cure, but not wait for a cure. Because as we wait, we decline. And there's just no upside to allowing ourselves to decline. And instead, we challenge the Parkinson's tribe, as I call my community. We challenge the tribe to get up and get out if they can, to move, to do something, to feel inspired about living well, and not just living well, but living well today. Because today is what we have. You know, Kyle, like you said, your mother found such good results from taking the medicine. That's an optimal case of being able to get back out and move forward. And so in essence, we strive to create momentum, because this disease will rob you of your momentum if you let it. And so we want to break free from the inertia that Parkinson's can impose. And to use a cycling analogy, we want to create a Parkinson's peloton. Peloton is a group of riders rolling down the road, and you roll faster as a group than you do as a solo rider. So we all, and you get this with your work with Pan, we all want to roll faster and roll more freely down the road together. And that's all I'm going to say for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Davis. Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kyle, and I really appreciate you having us today, and also the White House supporting our cause of Parkinson's, and I appreciate you sharing your family's story. My story started 19 years ago when I met the love of my life, who just happened to have Parkinson's. Sorry. I always say I love the man, not the disease, because I hate Parkinson's. I really do. And I hate the way it affects the people on this panel and the people in the audience, the people at home. But I'm very blessed that I found such a wonderful community to be a part of. And I do what I can every day to advocate for this community. So although I don't necessarily see myself as a champion, because it's just what I do every single day, I'm out here trying to be a voice for the care partners and caregivers in our community. So thank you.
So much. Gregory, turn it to you.
Why am I here? I'm here because almost 20 years ago, with early stage Parkinson's, I met the woman who would become my wife and partner in advocacy, Ann Campbell, now Ann Wasson, for quite some time. And we wandered into a little house in Santa Rosa that was then the headquarters of the Parkinson's Action Network. And we bumped into this woman, Joan Samuelson, and we introduced ourselves and said we were looking for something to do. And she said, well, why don't you come into this meeting? We're trying to figure out strategy on blah, blah, blah. And it never stopped. Through her dynamism and just charismatic presence and personality and absolute drive and determination, and those of other people like Morton, Millikendracky, and all the people that came along before I did, and that was quite a while ago. We just, Ann and I found a new home, a place where we could take what was a negative, a huge setback seemingly in life, and turn it into a positive. I mean, the last 15 to 20 years of my life have been perhaps in many ways the best 15 to 20 years of my life, because I've spent almost every day with the person I love doing something that I do love and that I think makes a difference. And as long as I can continue to get my voice up enough to be heard by a microphone, I'm going to continue to do that because that's what I do.
Stephen, turn it over to you.
Well, first, I'd also like to thank the White House and Parkinson's Action Network for helping put this program together. It's very humbling to be here, especially with this panel that I'm sitting with, and so many others that I think would sit in this chair as well or better than I am. So I feel like there's a lot to say to represent the overall community on the efforts that are being done to help fight this disease. I certainly personally have a family to thank for the support that they give me and the journey that I travel in. There's people like Hesplers and Baldwins and Platchett's and Robledos and Isaacs who have helped me shape my walk on how to make a difference in fighting the disease, and many other names that I should have been mentioning, but know that if they hear me out there, they're included in that list. I think one of the things that I try to do is to build partnerships, and working with many of the people on this panel to find treatment options, motivate patients to get involved with the disease, and trying to find the cure. And the thing I'm most noted for is what's called the Clinical Trial Transportation Program that we started in Connecticut. And we take patients to the different clinical trials. They can't get the transportation there. And in doing so, it's one of the major factors to inhibiting data that they need for the results on these studies. We've been able to get 70 patients to trials over the past few years, and that's all speeding the process, because one of the things we as patients are looking for the most is quicker results, so we can get a cure much quicker. So with that, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you very much for hosting this.
Thanks for being here. Just quickly before I move on to our next questions, I want to thank two people in the audience. One who I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite some time. I used to go to basketball games with him when I was a little kid, so let's give a round of applause for Morton Kondracki. You were training me even before I got here, so it's good. And also, you know, our office is really the office that is the front door to the White House. We are the folks that help bring in folks from around the country and work with organizations and advocacy groups. And you know, I think we're lucky to see the power of advocacy and the power of organizing in a really real way. So the first person I got in touch with after I found out about my mom was Ted Thompson. So I just want to give Ted a big round of applause in helping us put all this together today. So with that, Davis, I want to turn it back over to you. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the biggest challenges you see folks with Parkinson's facing today?
Well, I myself, I mean, Parkinson's has common symptoms, but it's very much, as we all know, an individual disease. But Greg and I were talking just when we went outside about the things with, it's not even so much the big things with Parkinson's that wear you down, it's the little things. And he was saying, you know, he was struggling to get his jacket on and had to ask for help. And we both shook our heads in knowing smiles, and as well with catching a toe while we put on a pair of pants or whatnot. I mean, it's just those daily little things that wear you out. But that said, we recently we asked this question with the Finney Foundation to a 25,000 or so mailing list, and we got about 2,000 responses back. And the number one thing people have difficulty moving is the number one thing people felt they had difficulty speaking was moving and exercise, and that was followed by struggles with sleep and struggles with balance, and I think that those are all struggles that we can and will define ways to meet the challenge of.
Thank you. All right. Well, we have another special guest here who came, heard you all were in the building and wanted to come by and say hello. So Josh Ernest, our press secretary, come on up and here's yours.
Good morning, everybody. I don't want to interrupt the session already that's already underway, but as Kyle points out, I did hear that you were all here, and I want to take an opportunity to thank you all for being here. It's also nice to begin my day by talking to a much friendlier audience than the White House press corps, so thank you already for the warm reception. This Champions of Change program that we have here at the White House is one of the most inspiring things that we do here. And the reason for that is that it goes to the very core of what it is this president believes in. The president believes that our country is strongest when we have people all across the country who are fighting for the priorities that they believe in. And when there is something that really touches the heart of people and they decide to get engaged in their community and to petition their government to act on it. And this is as good example of that as we have had come through the doors. That there are people in this room who have been very touched by Parkinson's and people who are fighting this on a daily basis. And the fact that you all are here is a testament to your commitment to making sure that your government is responding to this challenge in the same way that you are in your personal life. And that is a genuine inspiration. Let me tell you that one of the keys to this kind of success, and I see it every day when I walk into the briefing room, is the success that people have of making people stand up and notice some of the challenges that our country faces and whether or not our country is going to respond in a way that's going to meet that challenge. And this issue sort of manifests itself, or this kind of effort manifests itself on a broad range of issues. And there is the potential that we've already seen for us to raise awareness about this particular issue. And the president has demonstrated a commitment to research and development initiatives, that investments in research and development that only the federal government can make on the same kind of scale. There are a lot of philanthropic organizations that are making a substantial commitment to this effort, but obviously there are tremendous resources that are available in the federal government, not just financial commitments, but also stores of institutional knowledge and expertise that can be leveraged to really make progress. And in the Oval Office, there is a genuine champion for this effort. The president believes that investments in research and development and precision medicine in particular has enormous potential, and that there's an opportunity for us to make a difference in the lives of millions of Americans. It's also, frankly, in the mind of the president, an opportunity for us to make a substantial economic investment too. That these kinds of investments have a tremendous economic opportunity and can create jobs and really generate some economic growth and potential there as well. So there are a lot of reasons to make these kinds of issues a genuine priority. And so the president, as many of you saw, in his State of the Union address, talked about a $215 million investment through the NIH in precision medicine. So this is something that this is a genuine priority for the administration. So let me just close by thanking you all for being here. This is a testament to your personal commitment to this issue, and it's one thing to be moved by an issue and to feel strongly about it. It's another thing to actually make time in your lives to get involved. And what we see here are community leaders, advocates, researchers, and others who have an expertise coming together to really fight for something. And I want you to know that everybody here at the White House is inspired by your effort, and we know that we are here to support you, not the other way around. And so thank you for being here, and you have a genuine, I'll also say that I know that this is an issue that's near and dear to Kyle's heart, and there's nobody here that's a better advocate for you than Kyle. And so thank you for all of your work, and I hope that you have a really successful, energetic day and walk out of the gates of the White House today feeling as empowered, as energized as ever to keep up this fight. So thank you all for being here.
All right, so we'll continue on. Angela, so as a care partner, tell us a little bit about your experience and also just how you've been spreading the word in your community, how you've been talking to folks in Fairfax and across the country, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the successes there.
Well, Kyle, one of the challenges in our particular case is that Carl was diagnosed at the age of 23, but had symptoms at 17 years old. It took him 6 years to get a diagnosis because in the early 1990s, it was so rare to find someone so young that was suffering from the effects of Parkinson's. So when I met him 5 years later, he was already diagnosed, and we decided at that point in time that we would be partners in care, that I would care for him and he would care for me. And on a daily basis, it's really the unpredictability of the medications, whether they're going to work or not work, whether, the plan that we have to go to the mall, is he going to be able to walk into the mall and enjoy it, or will he be struggling with his balance, as Davis said, or festination, which is like a stumbling. So we always have a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan because, and flexibility is the key, certainly, in the schedule. So we've kind of tailored our life to live well with the disease, as Davis said, because we were trying to make the most of the opportunities that we have now. We work from home. We started our own businesses because of the ability to work at home is so much better than, having to do the Washington commute and going to the corporate office every day. So I would say the unpredictability is one of the worst things, and also the not knowing what the future holds. I find many care partners and caregivers in the community, that's probably the first thing that they say is, well, I went to my neurologist or movement disorder specialist, and they couldn't tell me what's going to happen. You really do have to take, as Davis said, one day at a time, one moment at a time, 1 hour at a time, because you're just not going to know. I mean, we do have some great medical therapies, but we also, Carl and I use a lot of complementary therapies. We use yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and Reiki and some other holistic therapies to actually help us cope with the disease. So we try a balanced approach between the medical therapies and the complementary therapies. And what I really see in the community, Kyle, is that care partners and caregivers are struggling. They struggle to hold a job and their loved one is on disability and is at home by themselves sometimes during the day, especially the younger onsets. They want to be contributing to society, but many times their symptoms, which some are seen and some are unseen. There are a lot of what we call non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. It's a big term, but it really means there's a lot of things. When you see somebody with Parkinson's, you may not know that they're struggling with depression or apathy or anxiety, or they may be on for 15 minutes and they look great, and 15 minutes later they're completely off and can't perform their work tasks. So they may end up not having a job. They may be released from their job, but there are also a large group of people that still have children at home, and they're trying to take care of their children, put their children through school. So this doesn't just affect the person with Parkinson's and the care partner. It affects the whole entire family. It affects the whole entire community because we have young, vivacious, active people, even into their 60s and 70s, who are contributing to society, but yet they're having to struggle every single day to put their pants on or to take their medicine or to just move around their home. And I think it's our duty and obligation to educate and advocate for the community, but also to educate and advocate outside of the community for people who don't understand what Parkinson's looks like. Because no person with Parkinson's, the three gentlemen that are on a panel with me, they have three completely different types of Parkinson's. It's an umbrella that has many different flavors underneath of it. So, and care partners for themselves, many times we are giving, and we don't take time to care for ourselves. And so then many care partners and caregivers end up in health situations themselves because the stress, because of the anxiety that they deal with, carrying so much of a burden. So I find that's probably the most distressing thing in our community is that the care partners and caregivers really need some help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we talked about some of the importance of advocacy, and we happen to have the guy who designed and implemented the Parkinson's Action Network's first national grassroots advocacy program. So Gregory, can you talk a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about that, the where you started and maybe where we've come today?
Yeah. Voice gets softer. Pull the mic closer. I started because I couldn't help but write and talk, and because I'm a big mouth, on an online bulletin board for neurological patients, and it had a Parkinson's board. And through an alliance with another disease group, the ALS group, less fortunate than us, we started an online petition to ask President Bush to not cut off funding for human embryonic stem cell research. And we garnered about 21,000 signatures. And lo and behold, the Director of Education and Advocacy at that time, John Rogers, popped his head up and took notice, and he called and asked if he could meet me at an airport. He had a layover for 20 minutes. And out of that, he asked if he gave us, by that time it was Ann and I, $25,000, could we create a grassroots organization? And I waited until the last moment, till 3 a.m. the day it was due, and put one together on a napkin, and then submitted it to him by email. He said yes, and we spent the next 2 years traveling across the country in the worst flea bags you can imagine to stretch out the dollars. And we ended up with a pretty well-functioning grassroots organization.
That's great.
And
That's awesome.
which has been made even better by its 2.0 version.
Yes. Stephen, we talk a lot here about state-based work and state-based organizing and how you can push, if we can't get something through Congress, how are you talking to mayors? How are you talking to governors? How are you talking to state legislators? And as the person who does this work in Connecticut, can you maybe talk a little bit about some of your state-focused work, and then also just how you organize at the state level, both for pushing the state and then also pushing federally?
Well, it is a collaborative effort. So we work with other support groups in the state. In fact, we formed an alliance called the Make a Difference Parkinson's Alliance, where the three largest support groups gathered and started using those resources that they have towards educational programs for patients, for research initiatives within the state and outside the state, and lobby our interests with our legislators, not necessarily while they're in D.C., but when they're in home and in our neighborhoods. And we found that to be very successful. And I wanted to give a congratulations and a thanks to the work NIH does with the funding they do have,
Yep.
and the amount of work they could do more with the right amount of funding. Not only them, but the FDA has the same funding needs, and those kind of needs just build efficiencies, build retention of some of the quality people that are doing the work right now, and so much more that could be done with those funds. And by lobbying on a state basis and sharing that message there within our independent legislations in Connecticut, where we did get a bill passed to help
Yep.
with stem cell research,
That's great.
or supporting the interests on a federal level, the laws that are trying to be passed through Congress now on health matters.
Great.
So a lot can be done just in your neighborhood.
Great. Beeping back here.
I was hoping it wasn't me.
It's my,
I'm
Somebody
like,
just paid
is
their
that
bill.
my DVS battery?
no, it's my med time.
All right,
I
there,
took my meds early, so.
there we go. So I want to ask all of you this question. What has been your best day so far in the fight against Parkinson's? So someone can jump in, go down the line.
The day that California voted to be the first state in the nation to legalize human embryonic stem cell research. AJ and I were a big part of that with testimony and campaigning up and down the state. And the second greatest was when we passed Proposition 71, which funded $3 billion for stem cell research in California.
That's awesome. Great. Not a bad day.
One of the worst days was this morning trying to get my coat on.
I thought you were going to say trying to get through security. So thank you.
Yeah, without freezing. To me, it's more personal, although I'd say I've had a lot of great days with our Victory Summit program where we get anywhere from 500 to 1,000 of our community into the room, and they get to listen to Dr. Oken and Dr. Dorsey and myself and others expound upon the ways in which we can all live better today. But to answer your question directly, I would say my latest best day was simply yesterday. Connie and I flew out to Washington, took a nice stroll through the monuments, and we got the word that our daughter had a breakthrough result in her Nordic ski racing career. And so it's just, for me, it's really bringing it in close to home, and I expect today will be just as good.
Good. Angela or Steve?
And are you ready, Steve? I'll wait.
I think, and I don't mean to sound canned with this, but every day is my best day. And I say that because there's probably not a day that doesn't go by where I don't talk to someone who at the end of that day says, "Thank you, Steve, for what you're doing for the cause." And when you wake up and you get at least one of those remarks in your day, you say, my day was complete. I did something that was helping someone else or making a difference. Every day ends that way, somehow. And so I'm very grateful for each one of those.
I'd like to concur with Steve. Every day I have with Carl is my best day. Waking up with him and going through the journey of our life together is extremely important. But I also wish for the day where we have treatments that either halt the progression of the disease or reverse the damage that's been done. I also wish for the day that care partners and caregivers and families don't have to struggle anymore living with this disease. So I'm very much an optimist. I know that's going to come. I don't know if it's going to come in my lifetime, but I would certainly know that the work of the Parkinson's Action Network, the Finney Foundation, all the Parkinson's organizations in our community who provide support services and support to the communities are making a difference. We always need more, but I'm really looking forward to that day that we don't have to come to the White House and have an event like this. But I do appreciate your help with that.
Well, I have to leave soon, so 2 years I'll be out. So.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to hire you. But as some of the organizations say, and as Ted said yesterday, we want to put ourselves out of business. So I want a day where all the advocates get together and we're on a beach having a Mai Tai somewhere, and we're not having to make these.
So I think the next
pleas.
forum is in Florida. Great. So I want to direct this question to Greg first. One of the things that we're trying to do here today is shine a spotlight on this, make sure that folks around the country understand it. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of just awareness, a broader national awareness about Parkinson's and the effects it has on people and how folks can help and how folks can support situations like that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes that advocacy on a patient or caregiver family level has produced is a change in the thinking of science itself about the shape of Parkinson's disease. When I was diagnosed, the trope was Alzheimer's took your mind but not your body. Parkinson's took your body but not your mind. It was neat, it was simple, and it was absolutely not true. And it took the efforts of patient advocates like the ones sitting out here in this room, year after year after year of saying, but I lost my sense of smell 10 years before I had symptoms. But I have problems with my gut. I have problems with this, with that. Things that, I have problems with cognition. Things that are not related to simply a breakdown in my ability to move and function in that regard. It finally, it took patients encouraging scientists, and scientists who know the science, because we don't. We can tell you how we feel, but not necessarily why we feel that way. But they took that ball and they eventually started running with it, and now we have a whole new paradigm for what Parkinson's is. And I think that patients and their loved ones, if they just keep on telling the truth, science is more and more willing to adjust for the truths that they're being told, and that will hurry us toward better treatments and cure.
Great. Liza, how are we doing on time? Perfect. So Davis, I'm going to turn that question to you. Stole your mic.
Repeat the question.
So, talk about the importance of national awareness, and kind of just spreading the word out across the country about Parkinson's.
Well, there's, as Greg and Steve and Angela have all spoken to the work they do and the work you all do on a national level on building funding and programs and awareness. I feel like one of my jobs is to build awareness within our community of what we all are capable of doing to improve our quality of life. And so there's that difference of awareness. And when Michael J. Fox is on The Good Wife, that's a huge awareness. That's huge awareness. That allows us to walk through airports, Carl, others, to walk through airports not feeling quite as self-conscious. But within our community, I feel like my voice is best expressed in ways of motivation and inspiration for our community to get up and get out and try and live well.
Thank you. Angela, you mentioned this a little bit at the top, but you've sort of dealt quite a bit with folks who have young onset of Parkinson's. Can you talk a little bit about the specific challenges that are faced with young people getting Parkinson's at an early stage?
I think, Kyle, of course I can't speak for them because I don't have the disease myself, but I think a lot of their challenges, what I've seen in support groups and other young onsets that they've met, is that it hits them in the peak of their lives, their working career, their family career. To be diagnosed at 20, 30, or 40, and your whole life's ahead of you, and then all of a sudden this monster, let's just call it a monster, joins you in the room, and it tries to steal from you all the time. Sorry, I'm not going back to what I did earlier, but it's fight. I'll constantly have to fight the monster, and then build your career, take care of your family. Take care of your parents, too. I mean, if you're in your 30s and 40s and you have someone who's in their 70s or 80s, I mean, the older you get, the more, it's kind of a common term, the older you get, the more likely you may come up with something like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or whatnot. But it's not just the people living with young onset Parkinson's, too. It's young onset Alzheimer's. It's any kind of chronic condition that impairs your ability to make a living, to contribute to society, to make a difference. Because we all want to make a difference, no matter how small or large the difference may be. And to cope with that, it's a tremendous weight on people's shoulders, and certainly for the caregivers too, having to take care of someone that you've decided to spend the rest of your life with, but having to do it so early on and add that to your tremendous load of responsibility that you already have takes an additional toll. I think it takes a psychological toll and an emotional toll. And none of this is all going to be solved by throwing money at it. I mean, the research, we definitely need the research. But we need some compassion from the community, some understanding about what the limitations and what the accessibility issues that we have. But also just reaching out and helping a neighbor, or reaching out and helping a friend, or providing transportation to a clinical trial or to a support group, somewhere where people can get the assistance that they need. So to sum that all up, young onset is just one of the many flavors. But it certainly does try to hit people at a younger time and lessens their ability to be a valuable member of society. But they're still there, and we need to still treat them as a valuable member of society.
Thank you. Steve, you touched on this a little bit before, and Angela just teed me up perfectly. But can you tell us a little bit about the clinical trial transportation program and maybe how we can spread that best practice across the country more?
Well, it certainly is a grassroots initiative, and it started as I was an ambassador for the World Parkinson Congress, traveling across the country, asking what's keeping people from getting involved with trials. Because there's about 80% of clinical trials that are slowed, delayed, and or canceled because of lack of participations in the trials. And that's pretty significant to me, and I started looking for the reasons why. And our community is, in general, willing to make a difference if you provide the opportunities for them. And so I said, well, what if we could get you there? That would be one thing that would help. And within the program, we also build in a community element, meaning 2 or 3 people travel at a time, because it can be pretty daunting, if not some fear of the unknown when you get into these studies. And when you're doing it with several others, they become more of a team basis, and it takes some of the edge away. And if you add a nice lunch to it, that's the icing on the cake.
All right.
So with the first trip, we brought 6 patients to Beth Israel Deaconess, to Dr. Gibbons, who was doing several studies. And these facilities are only used to getting 2 to 3 patients a month. When 6 people got out of a van for this study, their eyes grew wide, and it was like manna from heaven. And with that, we helped speed that trial to conclusion. Through speeding the trial to conclusion, several things happen. The data, the results becomes available sooner. The options for those treatments that could come from that come sooner. The costs go down, and too much value can occur from that kind of a program. And I know of other programs that are starting to grow outside of Connecticut, and we're now supplying patients to studies at Columbia in New York, Cornell-Weill, University of Massachusetts, and in Boston, and in that regional area, and building a database of people looking to make that kind of a difference. So it's a viable program that is going to help us get where we need to go sooner.
Great. All right, so we're going to move on to our next panel, but before we do that, let's just give our champions one more round of applause.